thank everyone for being here today. You know, over the past 18 days, we've seen millions of Americans speak up about the racial injustices within our country. We've seen Americans of diverse backgrounds speak up about the unjust killing of George Floyd. George Floyd was not the only person to be victimized by these injustices, but rather he serves as the spearhead of the grief marginalized Americans have dealt with for much too long. Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and countless others have been victimized by the same injustice. The protests that we have seen across the country, most of them peaceful, stem from the centuries of anger, frustration, and grief. We are indeed at a crossroads in our nation's history, and we have the potential to transform this moment into a movement, one where we can bring our goal to justice to fruition. As Mayor President, it's my mission to create a community which is driven by peace, prosperity, and progress for everyone, regardless of the color of your skin or the zip code that you live in. The push for equity has been my mission long before I held this office, and it is my intent to ensure it remains long after. In 2017, my administration began our work to create an equitable and just community. This work began by bringing reform to our Baton Rouge Police Department. My administration began the work of aligning our Baton Rouge Police Department with the pillars outlined in President Barack Obama's 21st Century Policing Report. And over the last 3.5 years, we have instituted a series of reforms that led to dramatically improved community relations and put the policies and recommendations needed into practice. Our reforms include establishing an accountable use of force policy, requiring de-escalation in situations, equipping all of our officers with body cameras, banning chokeholds, implementing procedural justice training for all officers, and improving and intensifying officer wellness programs. In addition to implementing policies to hold our officers accountable, Baton Rouge was released from a 39-year consent decree around discrimination against Black and female applicants in the Baton Rouge Police Department. Since then, our cadet classes have been the most diverse in Baton Rouge history. Progress takes place intentionally. It's just not going to happen without somebody being committed and dedicated to seeing that it happens. It's an ongoing process. And as I have said many times before, we cannot police our way out of our problems. Inequities exist because the scope of law enforcement and they continue to define our livelihoods. Inequities exist beyond the scope of law enforcement, and they continue to define our livelihoods. With equitable systems, marginalized communities face barriers when seeking basic opportunities for security and advancement. This is why my administration has spent the last 3.5 years addressing inequities across the board. Inequities in housing, healthcare, education, and in our economy. All of these sectors are interconnected, not mutually exclusive. We cannot progress further without uplifting all aspects of our community. Baton Rouge has moved the needle, but we must recognize that there is still work to be done. The only way for us to move forward as a community of peace, prosperity, and progress is to ground ourselves in racial equality, social justice, and social cohesion within the infrastructure of our government systems and our society. I asked you all to come out today to announce my next step in my mission for an equitable future. I have signed an executive order to establish the Mayor's Commission on racial equity and inclusion, which will work to instill accountability, racial equity, and inclusion throughout the city and parish. The commission will focus on community and economic development, education, health and human services, arts, culture, and community-based nonprofits, and lastly, government entities. Through this commission, we will convene open and honest dialogues with public and private sector leaders, as well as with community members from across the city and parish. From here, the commission and its associates will work to understand, directly challenge, and fundamentally transform inequitable institutions, policies, and culture. Establishing this commission creates an opportunity for our community to provide the foundation to create the path forward to a more equitable future. The commission will help surface the systemic and structural barriers for people of color that exist in our community and propose a path forward to moving those obstructions. In addition, they will identify strategies and target resources to address the root causes of inequities in our community. As Mayor President, I, along with other leaders, can use this guidance to address historic and persistent divisions of race and class through public symbols, to assess the health equity implications of current proposed policies, to focus on areas of disinvestment, and to recognize the contributions of all communities of color. We cannot shy away from the opportunity to discuss important topics such as race and racism as we work to build a community of peace, prosperity, and progress for everyone. It is imperative for our dialogue to produce more than ideas and conversations. Our dialogue should produce direct actions. One of my favorite quotes comes from Shirley Chisholm. She once said, "You don't make progress by standing on the sidelines, whimpering and complaining. You make progress by implementing ideas." As we move forward towards a more equitable and inclusive future, we will choose faith over fear, for it is the only path that will bring about the transformative change that we all desire. I want you to know this. I stand with each and every one of you. I hear you, Baton Rouge. I hear you, East Baton Rouge Parish. I recognize the need for substantive progress in East Baton Rouge Parish, and I embrace the need for reform in many spaces. It cannot wait. I look forward to seeing how we can work together to transform this moment, one rooted in anger and injustice, into the foundation for a more peaceful and more just society for everyone. Thank you. I'll take any questions if you might have.
Who will be on this committee, Mayor Broome, and how will you determine the membership?
Good question. So I'll share with you the commission makeup. The commission makeup will be 4 areas of focus, as I said: community and economic development, education, health and human services, arts, culture, and community-based nonprofits, and government entities. And so each one of those focuses will start with 4 members representing each focus area. All members must be residents of East Baton Rouge Parish, and they will be appointed by the Mayor President. 5 at-large residents from East Baton Rouge Parish, who will be appointed by the Mayor President, and 3 members of the student body, 3 members who are the student body presidents of Southern University, Louisiana State University, and Baton Rouge Community College. And we do have an application process for those individuals who desire to be on the commission. They can go to brla.gov/equity commission. That's brla.gov/equity commission.
Can you talk a little more about what the commission will do?
Certainly. And all of you all in the press will get a copy of the executive order, which really spells out all of the duties and responsibilities of the commission. So, as I shared with you the four focus areas, I will share with you some of the anticipated goals of the commission: to convene open and honest dialogue with the public and private sector leaders, as well as with community members from across the city parish. They will collect data on race and ethnicity and other proxies such as policies, practices, attitudes, and culture, and the recommended implementation of potential changes to aid and construct these areas identified through the lens of race and racial equity. They will offer specific recommendations and develop a work plan that brings community voices and concerns into action. The commission will report to the mayor president and metropolitan council on the performance and attainment of these racial equity goals and other directives, and they have a 90-day period to do this. They will also support the progress towards attaining racial equity and social justice goals as a fundamental part of their evaluation of the performance of our city and parish. And they will promote inclusion and full participation of all residents, partnering with the community to achieve racial equity across East Baton Rouge Parish.
So in 90 days, they'll come back with
A recommendation on how we can improve racial equity and inclusion throughout the city and parish.
Yeah.
Yes.
So at this point, there aren't anyone on this?
No, I'm taking applications for it. That's one of the, I think, the strengths of this commission. So many times, people say, well, I didn't know about this board, or I didn't know about this commission, or I wanted to be involved. Well, those people who want to be involved in this process, I'd love to hear from you by submitting an application at brla.gov/equity commission.
Another question. I know, when you were making the announcement about the commission, you said that you hear the people of Baton Rouge, you hear the people of East Baton Rouge Parish. What do you say to those people who marched yesterday to the DA's house and the calls for him to step down?
Well, people have the right to peacefully protest. They have the right to speak and say what their beliefs are. Those individuals obviously had or have concerns, and that was one of the ways that they chose to express it. Look, I've been having conversations with the peaceful protesters throughout our city and our parish, and I believe the only way that we can have significant and transformative change is that we have to listen to people, regardless of their zip code, regardless of the color of their skin, regardless of their age. We need to hear this is a moment, as I've said before. This is a moment in time where there is a clarion call for leaders to listen to the people. And so I think it's incumbent upon all leaders to listen and hear what people are saying, to see if there is a cross-section or an intersection, if you will, of potential change and agreement. I also think that this is the time where people are receiving information and have a heightened awareness about not only what's going on in the nation, but in their own community. For example, I have been on national platforms just in the past week as conversations have occurred around law enforcement and police reform. And I have had to say, in truth, that after 2016, with the killing of Alton Sterling, we began almost my first week in office trying to reform and transform our police department. We already established policies around use of force, around chokeholds, around many of the lists that people are promulgating now for change. We started that in 2017. So this is a moment to elevate awareness. You know, sometimes people don't realize what's going on in their own community until you have a moment like this. And so while we have made those changes, I recognize that change is always evolving, and that there has to be, and that there is always room for improvement. So what are we doing as a city and a parish? We're building on the foundation of reform that has started in law enforcement. We're also building on the reform that I started in 2017 as it relates to disinvested communities. You know, the irony about a lot of this is that when I started office in 2017, I started talking about disinvested communities. I started talking about police reform. I started talking about equity and inclusion. And guess what? When I started talking about it almost 3.5 years ago, it was, no. You're too concerned about one side of the community. You're not concerned about everyone. Well, now I think everyone has the revelation that we are all intersected in growing and building a better community. And that, as I have said very simplistically time after time again, you cannot have one part of your community at a D grade, another part of your community at an A grade, and think you're achieving equity and inclusion, and that you're a thriving and prosperous city. It doesn't happen like that. And what we are seeing right now in this movement is a result of that. The lack of equity and inclusion and listening to the people. Let me use it. I'll get right back. Yes.
In the midst of everything that's happening right now, how do you feel? What's your response to Councilwoman Tara Wicker joining the race?
I have no response to that. You have a question?
My question is, what happens when you're no longer in this position and a person with an oppressive mindset or disposition towards minorities has the ability to put quote-unquote community leaders in these positions? Like, what are the preventative measures that we're taking to stop us from backtracking after this?
That's an excellent question. And I don't know if everybody heard her question, but the question is, well, if I'm not in this position, how? So I think it's incumbent upon you and others. I'm held accountable. I'm an elected official. And I don't have a problem in saying elected officials have to be held accountable because you're elected by the people. And it's also incumbent upon citizens to vote for people that they believe represents their values and that have an agenda to advance equity and inclusion, racial equity and inclusion, that understands the value of social justice in a community. And so that is part of the democratic process. And I think the change, even when people who don't represent your values are in office, one of the ways to change that is at the ballot box.
Outside of the police space, where you are working on reforms, and then the certain DBE requirements at City Hall, what specifically and practically can you do, besides just creating a dialogue and a space for people to talk and be heard? Mm-hmm. What little, laws? I mean, because there's a Metro Council that I think still hasn't passed a tolerance ordinance in that way.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, so out of this commission and the recommendations, I expect a strategic path forward, whether it's around policies that need to be implemented, economic development that needs to occur. For example, we spent a lot of dollars focusing on disinvested communities through groups like Build Baton Rouge. We've got the Plank Road Corridor project. So I don't see this as fluff. I see it as bringing the people in to say, okay, we're at this moment in history where the issue of race and racism is the top priority, the elimination of race and racism, the sentiment of equity and inclusion is at the top of everybody's minds. And the good thing is that people of all races want to get involved. People are getting it. They're saying if we are going to have a thriving and prosperous community, then we've got to involve everybody. And there are people who are doing self-evaluation who say they want to change. People who are recognizing that, well, look, maybe I've been part of the problem. And so this is one of those moments that we have to seize. And this is one way I'm trying to seize the moment, is through this commission. It's not the final frontier, but for me as mayor president, it's a start, and I think it's a great start.
Any other questions?
Will the police department or any representatives be on the commission or somehow involved in the discussion?
Well, as I said, one of the focus areas is government entities, and because this commission will be open to the public, I believe that there will be more public involvement, and perhaps the police will be able to come in and make presentations, law enforcement, other entities to the commission. You know, I will say that we do have an avenue right now, thanks to Chief Murphy Paul, where he established in his own right a Chiefs Advisory Council, and they have regular meetings, and the public is very engaged in that process. You know, we had an excellent example of community involvement in making decisions when we went through the hiring of Chief Murphy Paul. I know many of you may recall that we had a community committee that vetted the candidates for chief of police. And through that vetting process of community citizens, we came up with 5 candidates that were recommended. And so I see this commission as having the same impact of being engaged and helping us move our city forward as it relates to racial equity and inclusion. I want to thank you all so much for coming out today. We'll make sure that all of you all get a copy of the executive order. And if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to Mark Armstrong. Thank you all so much and have a blessed day.